Mountains are much closer to civilization than you might think. They actually serve as the background for the modern city of Calgary. It started as an outpost for the Canadian Mounties. Today its population is 650,000. And today, Calgary enters a new chapter in its history. It becomes host to the athletes of the winter sports world.
In September of '87, we had the official opening ceremony. I knew we had a success because as I stood on those steps, what is now Olympic Plaza was surrounded with Calgarians. I had never seen that number of people in the east end of downtown Calgary, period.
I'm John Lewis, and you're listening to 360 Degree City, a podcast where we talk to all kinds of folks that are making life in cities better. Our hope is at the end of each episode, you'll start to see your own city from a slightly different angle. If you think about Calgary's 1988 Winter Olympics, certain images may pop into your head. Perhaps you think of the English ski jumper Eddie the Eagle.
Eddie the Eagle Edwards.
Everybody remembers Eddie the Eagle in the Olympic Games in Calgary.
Or maybe the Jamaican bobsled team comes to mind.
The amazing true story of athletes from Jamaica who, against all odds, qualified for the 1988 Winter Games in Calgary.
The Olympics are often remembered for the moments that happened during the event, but today we thought we would explore an example of the built legacy that Olympics and large-scale events can leave behind. So today, we're going to dive into the history of Olympic Plaza here in Calgary. If you've never been to Olympic Plaza, let me paint a picture of what it's like today. This will give you some context for the rest of the episode. You're in the east end of downtown in Calgary, standing in the middle of the plaza. Look north to 7th Avenue, and you'll see the light rail transit, or what we call the C-Train, moving Calgarians across downtown. Turn east, and you'll find a large blue glass building. That's the Calgary Municipal Building, the seat of local government. Slightly to the left is a sandstone structure. That's the 1911 Historic City Hall. Look further east and you'll see a 4-story geometric building that's currently being built. That's the new Central Library. Next to the library is the emerging area of the East Village. Back at the plaza, if you turn south, you'll see Arts Commons, a multi-venue art center which occupies almost the entire southern block. Look west and you'll find folks strolling down Stephen Avenue, which is a nationally registered historic site and a pedestrian-oriented shopping street. Look up and you'll see the almost 200-meter tall Calgary Tower. Today, this is a happening spot. But back in the 70s, things were different.
The east side of downtown Calgary, when I moved here in the mid-70s, was pretty run down in many areas. Very few people went east of Centre Street at that stage. East Village was in the process of falling apart as opposed to now it's being constructed.
Back then, the plaza space was a parking lot. Nearby, there were a few old shops, and the Stampede Parade would march by every July. A few years ago, our team at Intelligent Futures worked on a project that explored ideas with the public on how Olympic Plaza could be refreshed and updated. As with any conversation about city building, it's important to understand the history of a place in order to understand its future. It was during this process that I spoke to Richard Parker about the history of Olympic Plaza.
Hi, I'm Richard Parker. I'm a professional planner by training. Came to Calgary in 1974 as a main grade planner. Ended up working there for 30 years, the last 15 of which I was head of the planning function in Calgary.
This episode dives into the decisions made and the key lessons learned from the construction of Olympic Plaza. While it talks about a specific place, it's a good example of the many factors that can contribute to why things happen in city building, and also why they don't happen. In Calgary today, we're grappling with the possibility of bidding on the 2026 Olympics, so Olympic infrastructure is top of mind for many in our city. Let's rewind a few decades to learn about how and why Olympic Plaza began. Ideas for the area evolved many years before the Olympic bid became a reality for Calgary.
The idea of this started with the 1966 downtown plan. That plan always envisaged an open space at the east end of the Stephen Avenue Mall in the vicinity of what is now Olympic Plaza. So that's where the idea started.
The 1966 plan also proposed 7th Avenue to become the transit corridor and for Stephen Avenue to become a pedestrian mall. Fast forward to September 1981.
City of Calgary was selected for the 1988 Winter Olympics. As I said, we won it in a boom and built it in a bust. Right as soon as the games were awarded, some of the folks in the planning department, including myself, were saying, here's an opportunity to go and get the open space we'd planned for in that
15 years prior.
Plan, and do it temporarily and show Calgarians. Because if you'd suggested to Calgarians in that you wanted to spend money creating an open space in the East End, most of them, first question would be, where's that? They just had no concept in the City Hall. It wasn't an area where there was people congregating or anything like that. And that kind of reminds me of the statement in the front of the Mawson Plan, which is Calgary's first plan done back in 1911 to 1914. And he was talking of Calgary as 1 million people, which it wasn't even at the time of the Olympics, so many years before. And he said in his introduction to the plan, the purpose of city planning is not to tear down your city and rebuild it. It's rather to decide what it is you want, so when the opportunity presents itself, you build the right thing. Mm-hmm. The opportunity was the Olympics.
Not much happened from 1981 to 1983.
So along comes 1984. The Winter Olympics were held in Sarajevo. And Sarajevo had a traditional European public square, and they said to the Olympic Organizing Committee, can we present the medals there? And they said yes. Well, when everyone came back from that, they were so excited about this, and it was the concept began to evolve of Olympic Plaza as an official Olympic venue that you could attend for free. Calgarians who either couldn't obtain because there was a shortage of tickets, or in many cases couldn't afford them, could participate in the Olympics. There were two things that we changed in Calgary. One is the medals were presented at the venue, and secondly, the names of all the winners of those medals were placed on the main stadium, which in this case was McMahon Stadium, where the opening and closing ceremonies were. We sort of started evolving the idea and talked about not only having the medals presented there, but also the plaques for the winners located in that area.
The city got support from the Olympic Organizing Committee to build the plaza as an official Olympic venue.
Suddenly, what had been planners talking about, we'll plant some grass and have a party there during the Olympics, was taking on a different thing. However, there was a key decision that related to all of the Olympic facilities built in Calgary, I believe in part because of the experience of Montreal and budget overruns where their committee built facilities. The Olympic Organizing Committee said, we are not going to build any facilities for the Olympics. We will have the end user build it. So this was the case with the speed skating oval, which the university built, with the upgrades to the David Bauer Arena, which the city did. They said, spend the money to build it long term, so you're worried about maintenance and ongoing, and we'll use it for the Olympics. Okay. Which I think was a brilliant idea. So we started designing the Olympic Plaza, and we designed it not for the Olympics. We designed it to be the park that had been envisaged back in 1966. The challenge we faced with that was that we knew we wanted it to be a celebration space in downtown Calgary. The question is, we didn't really know how big. Right. But we knew we had a block of land.
Along the block of land, there was a new performing arts center, what's now called Arts Commons. But the folks who built the arts center weren't aware that an open space was planned for next door. So the arts center was constructed in a way that was very closed off from the future Olympic Plaza. The train line on 7th Avenue was operational at this time, which added another physical barrier. And these factors made the space feel a bit constrained.
So one of the key decisions made was that we were not going to build Olympic Plaza on the whole block. that it wasn't going to be one block of open space. That it was designed so that the northwest corner, you could build a building on that corner to activate the space.
The design team brought in a man named Paul Friedberg,
who was a New York urban designer who'd done a lot of open spaces, and Carson McCullough, who were the landscape people. And we went and had a look at different open spaces in North America. We went out to Vancouver, we went down to Seattle.
They also visited Pioneer Courthouse Square in Portland.
They had the concern about potentially street people taking it over. That's, I know, sounds a bit derogatory, but it's not intended in that way. They had built a cafe right on the plaza, which I wished we had done, right? It was just a small one, but at least started it. But the other thing they had is they had a budget to have a security officer on the plaza. Instead of having a traditional security officer with security and a radio and everything else, and I don't know how this came about, whether the person suggested, they actually hired a clown. And he was there on the plaza during the day with balloons in his pockets and so on.
Yeah.
And entertained the kids, and so they animated it. But he had a microphone in the flower, he had a little button. And as soon as he saw something that was looking as though it could get a little bit, he wouldn't intervene, but he'd just press the button, and he was talking to the downtown police guys.
Oh, really?
And saying, would you mind just driving by?
Although Calgary didn't adopt the clown idea, they learned from Portland that you've got to think of creative ways to animate space. There are many key takeaways from this North American Plaza tour.
If you're trying to have a space which is intimate, where people can go out and have lunch and do that, and accommodate crowds, that's a challenge.
Right.
But it doesn't mean you can't do it. But secondly, we learn what activates open space is people. What attracts people is informal activities, particularly food. That if people can get food, etc., at a location, they're far more likely to go there, regardless of what the other activities were. But that was always the tension with the design of the space, was how do we make it big enough for the celebration and intimate enough for the day-to-day end user after the Olympics.
And that's one of the challenges that our work a few years ago. It's still there. How do you balance programmed and informal? Yeah.
Well, and the first thing to remember is the city was half the size it is now when we were doing this.
Right.
There wasn't an open space. The only open space downtown that served anything was Princess Island. Everyone assumed if you wanted a lot of people. In those days, in the mid-'80s, I used to go down to Canada Day on Princess Island. There was 50,000 people there. It was, you couldn't get across the bridge. That was where the activities were. We also had to guess. Our guess at the design stage was that if Canada won a gold medal and we might have 10,000 people down there. I'll tell you what happened in a little bit. But the design of the plaza was therefore, so the first thing we said is, we don't want to build the whole block. And we do want to have a space that is large enough that we can accommodate a fairly large crowd.
Have a good party.
Therefore, it became what is now the wading pond and the ice rink. Initially, we had not proposed the ice rink because the budget we had wouldn't allow it. Went to council, and council said, hang on, this is the Winter Olympics, how about putting ice in? And I'll talk about how it became a wading pond in a moment. The other key issue we had was, yes, the stage is going to be that for the Olympics. What backdrop do we have for that stage? Well, traditionally, if you've got a rectangular block, which is all Calgary ones, longer east-west than north-south, is you'd put it in that direction. But the backdrop to that would have been the municipal building, or the Ice Palace as it was being called. That's when it became the famous turn it as a diamond shape by turning it 45 degrees. And there's a picture, a cartoon of one of the councillors of the day with her head in different shapes trying to decide how Olympic Plaza should be designed. But that had two effects, which I think make Olympic Plaza unique. One is that the backdrop to the stage is now the historic 1911 City Hall. It's the municipal buildings off to the side. The other is that when you're standing on the stage, you're looking at the Calgary Tower, which of course was the location of the Olympic flame, and still is when we win anything significant or Canada wins gold.
The city made a strong effort to engage the public during the construction of the plaza. From Pioneer Square in Portland, they got the idea to sell bricks.
Sold your name on a brick in Olympic Plaza for $18.88, and that money was devoted to a fund for programming the plaza after the Olympics. So we'd concentrated all on the long-term use.
And actually so that was an intentional move to move from a place that was neglected to unknown into actually creating, in this case with the bricks, actual ownership in a way of the space, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we said, who's going to vote for money to maintain a park in downtown? Nobody who votes lives there, right?
Yeah.
So that was to create the ownership of the plaza. Extremely successful, so much so that we had to sell another set of bricks after the Olympics because everyone came and said, we want the same opportunity.
During our conversation with the community, we heard that there is still a strong emotional attachment to these bricks. 30 years after the Olympics were held here, many community members felt strongly that the brick should be maintained in any future redevelopment of Olympic Plaza.
Hi, I'm Avery Lewis, John's daughter. Here's a fun fact. My grandpa, Don Lewis, John's dad, made the ice for the curling at the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary. We still have Grandpa's super cool Olympic jacket and sweater. Check out the 360 Degree City social media accounts to see that sweet Olympic style.
You're listening to 360 Degree City. Today, I'm talking to Richard Parker about the history of Calgary's Olympic Plaza, which was built for the 1988 Olympics. A couple of minutes ago, Richard said he'd explain how Olympic Plaza became a wading pond, which happened on the plaza's opening day.
We come to 1987, the excitement starting to build for the Olympics. The first thing that happens is there's a little official opening ceremony. Kids, everyone, you can come down. Mayor Ralph Klein gets up on the stage and says, "Kids, this is a lovely hot day. Why don't you all go for a paddle?" Parks Department folks had never put water filtration or anything on, but it became a paddling pool that day, and we had to retrofit that in. But the other one, I wasn't there that day. Ken Knights, who the director of Parks, tells me that story, that I can remember is in September of 87, we had the official opening ceremony, and I was part of the party back in the mayor's office, etc., having been on the design committee for it. And when we came walking out of City Hall at 12 noon or whatever time it was around the lunch hour, I knew we had a success because as I stood on those steps, what is now Olympic Plaza was surrounded with Calgarians. I had never seen that number of people in the east end of downtown Calgary, period.
Right.
The next thing we did was everyone was desperate to acknowledge that 1988 was the Olympic year. And Calgary had been building sort of New Year's Eve celebrations a little bit. But we put on a New Year's Eve party. And the party was going to be on Olympic Plaza and the Municipal Plaza with McLeod Trail closed. In the planning for that, the initial guess was 10,000 people. They doubled it the day before in terms of food stuff because Safeway or someone was giving free hot dogs. I was in that crowd, and it's the only time in Calgary I've ever been concerned just because not the crowd was anti, the sheer volume. We don't know officially, but we guess there were 80,000 people there that night. We had to stop the LRT at one point until we could get crowd control barriers up.
Wow.
This is 6 weeks before the Olympics starts.
Yeah.
Talk about a wake-up call for the Olympic Organizing Committee.
After days, weeks, years of preparation, finally the countdown is over. The games begin.
Behind us is probably the most important venue in the whole Calgary Games, the plaza where the medals will be presented each evening. It's free. There isn't a sporting event that will be conducted there, and I'm betting it will be a minimum of 20,000 people a night. And if a Canadian wins a gold, you won't be able to move down there.
Come the Olympics, we had the tower with the flame on it. We had this nightly fireworks display. We had bands. We had everything. During the Olympics, and I was down for 13 of the 14 nights, we never had less than 40,000 people a night on the plaza.
And your guess a few months before was 10. If Canada won a gold medal, which never came up.
The time we won the bronze that was presented there, we had 70,000.
Oh, is that right?
It was something like that. It was just amazing. Calgarians took to it. And I think the important point about that goes back to the BRIC program. We'd got the money. We said the worst thing to do is have everyone fall in love with it at the Olympics and then forget about it.
Right.
So we programmed the heck out of it. We had the money. We'd said to council every time we went for a capital budget, you've got to program it. And it was very successful, I believe, through into the 90s. There were New Year's Eve celebrations. So the things that have happened there, we'd done a list of them as a possibility, dreaming. They've all happened. We had New Year's celebrations. We won the Stanley Cup the following year. That was a presentation there. I got a picture of my kids with the cup there. And, we've won the Grey Cup. We've had the Stampede parades. We've had all sorts of things. And, of course, as we're talking, there's stuff going on in the Plaza Rope Square, which used to be a portion of 8th Avenue, is now on that area. And so I think, from my perspective, Olympic Plaza really succeeded in some ways beyond our expectations, but it also showed the challenge of having a space that is suitable for the quiet thing and for the large crowds. The reason why it hasn't evolved as we hoped is that we never got either the food services or that building there which would put eyes on it.
Some of those animating factors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Richard learned many lessons from the development of Olympic Plaza.
Talk to people who have had experience elsewhere, but more important than talk to them, listen to them.
the key distinction there.
The key distinction, yeah.
One person Richard listened to was William H. White. White was an American urbanist and professional people watcher. In 1980, he published the book The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces, which launched a mini revolution on how to plan and study public spaces. White visited Calgary during the conception stage of Olympic Plaza.
One of the points he made was this need to animate the space with people. The other thing he said is, whatever your budget, put 10% of it away because you won't get it right first time and you'll need to retrofit, which turned out to be true. We had a lot more grass there originally. We had to go back and brick it because the volume of usage was too much. One of the other things William White told me in terms of open spaces, put as much electrical power as you can. Ideally have an electrical power grid going over the open space. Right. Because you can only animate it with sound and so on.
He also learned to think big.
Think big. Do not just think about the building that you're being asked to build. Think about what it is that activity can contribute both to the city as a whole and to the area in which you're dealing with. Look for opportunities beyond the site that you're dealing with, opportunities to either partner or animate.
Yep.
The other thing there is another project I was involved in was the Olympics always has an art program. They were funding 4 temporary arches, Olympic arches. And 2 of them were near Olympic Plaza. So look for the opportunity thing. The other thing I think is not only consult with the public about what they want, but more particularly do that early enough so that it can influence how you do something about it and what you build.
Right.
But then take action to keep them interested in it. One of the problems is the length of time it takes to build something. As I said, as soon as the hoarding went up, we had a Saturday when Calgarians were invited down. A local paint operation gave us cans of paint, and the kids painted their view of the Olympics, some amazing ones. Some different ones. It just that's done quite common now, but that was a first.
Okay.
And I know there are people who say Olympic Plaza was built temporarily for the Olympics. Olympic Plaza was built permanently as an open space to also be an Olympic legacy.
I tell all kinds of people all kinds of facts now. I know, thanks to you about this. But I think what's it really does is it highlights how many different moving parts go into a piece of infrastructure or design or architecture that you just might walk by, you might have a picnic in, but you just have no idea about all that goes into it. And from early plans in the 60s to the Olympics to present day, and how many factors influence our spaces. It's really fascinating. As we spoke with the community about Olympic Plaza during our work there, we concluded with a number of challenge questions to think about should redevelopment of the plaza take place. These questions were: how might we honor the Olympic legacy and heritage of the space while recognizing the current and future reality of Calgary? How might we activate the Olympic Plaza Cultural District in a way that facilitates both structured and organic happenings? How might we balance the green and gray elements of Olympic Plaza? How might we activate the space in all seasons? That's something that's a good challenge for a place that has winter as much of the year as Calgary does. How might we celebrate local food and commerce in the space? How might we fully integrate arts and culture into the life of the Olympic Plaza Cultural District? How might we make Olympic Plaza safe and welcoming for all? How might we ensure all Calgarians have access to the Olympic Plaza Cultural District? And while these challenge questions were specific to the Olympic Plaza conversation, they really reflect the inherent challenges and tensions that occur in many aspects of city building, and in particular, planning and designing public spaces. Well, I guess we'll see if there's a 2.0 as Calgary explores the Olympic bid for 2026.
Well, who knows? Yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us. 360 Degree City is created by the team at Intelligent Futures. To learn more about the work we do, you can go to intelligentfutures.ca. The music in this episode and in all our episodes is by Sound of Picture. If you like the podcast, please share it with someone that might be interested in seeing their own city from a different angle. We would love it if you subscribed and reviewed the podcast, and would love to hear your feedback. If you have any suggestions for future guests or topics that you'd like us to cover, get in touch with us on our website or any of our social accounts. I'm John Lewis. Thanks for stopping by.